In this video, we're going to talk about simple interest. This is a fairly simple calculation, which is one reason it's called simple interest, but it is very basic. It applies to interest that you earn on something like a CD, or you might pay on a thing like a personal loan. It's very simple. As it shows here, the interest is principal times the rate times the time, where principal is the amount that you either invest or borrow, and R is the rate, and we usually write that as an annualized rate. It's typically given to you that way when you go to the bank or wherever. And the time, we express that in years as well. So if you do have something in months or partial amounts of a year, you need to convert that to years. This only calculates the interest, but sometimes you wish to know the future value. Let's say if you put $5,000 in a CD for 2 years and you have a 3% rate, what will that money be worth? And so for that future value, you look at your initial principal plus your interest, and we know the interest is principal times rate times time. And so here, we do a little algebra step, and algebra says we can factor out something that's common to both pieces, and there's a P here, and there's a P here. So you can say P goes into P one time, and P goes into PRT, RT times, and so we can put the P on the outside with parentheses. So if you see that future value equation, that's where it comes from. You take your principal times 1 plus your rate times your time. So let's come down and work some examples and see how this works. So this person here is a student taking out a simple interest loan for $2,000 for 9 months. So we're going to do our interest calculation. So principal is $2,000, and we have the rate, which is 0.065. Be careful with the rates. Always move the decimal 2 places. Sometimes when there's a percentage that already has a decimal in it, people just kind of make silly mistakes and call that 0.65, but it's 0.065. And the time is 9 months, but recall that we must write it in years. So if you're given months, let's write it as 9/12, and that will give us how many years that is. So 3/4 of a year is effectively what 9 months is. So let's find out what this is on our calculator. And when I do this, I get 9750. And so part B of this question says, what is the future value of the loan? So the future value is this A equals principal plus interest. And so we know our principal is $2,000, and our interest we just calculated was $97.50, so we just add those two numbers very simply, and we get $2,097.50. Now, sometimes a question might come out, and I think this next example does just that. It may want to know what is the future value alone, and so in that case you would use this formula to get there a little quicker. So we're going to do that next. So to borrow money, you pawn your guitar, and the pawnbroker pays you $1,080 for this guitar. All right, so let's see, 1 month later you get the guitar back by paying the pawnbroker $1,472. What annual interest rate did you pay? So our formula we're going to use is that one I just underlined above. And so our future amount of this guitar after we pawn it is $1,472, and we'll use the present value, or the initial value is $1,080. And we're going to solve for the rate, so we don't know R. We're going to leave R alone. And now here's the trick. Also, one other trick here. 1 month later, just as above, we're going to write that as the fraction 1/12 because we must use years. All right, so in algebra, if we want to solve for R and we have 1,080 outside in parentheses, we have to do a little basic algebra step of dividing both sides by 1,080. And on our calculator, we get 1.3629,629. The 629 repeats forever. And so by doing that, 1,080 cancels, and we're left with just the 1 plus 1/12 R on that side. So now again, we're trying to solve for R, so we're going to subtract 1 from both sides, and that's come down. We get just the decimal portion of that number, 0.3629629. So now that's equal to 1/12 R. And so here's the final step of algebra. If we want to solve for R here, and it's 1/12 is multiplied by R, if we multiply both sides by 12, it will cancel that 1/12. And so 1/12 times 12 is 1, and that cancels that out, so we're left with R equals, and again we get our calculators back out, and we get 4.35555 repeats forever, so we round to 4.356. Now here's a common mistake other people make. When we get an answer and it's a decimal like this, some say, oh, it's 4.356%, and that's not it. Remember, this is a decimal number. To convert it to a percent, we need to move the decimal over 2 places. So this is 435.6%, and if you look at the blue instructions for the problem, it says round to the nearest whole number. So we would put in 436%. And as you see, that is a very high interest rate, and this is very common, unfortunately, with things like pawn shops and payday loan places. So always be careful if you're walking into these situations. And if you have any questions, let me know.